She graduated from college. She is now the vice principal at the Hopkins House Early Education Center over on Payne Street here in Alexandria. Then my middle son, Cameron, he is a senior now at Old Dominion University. And our youngest boy, who we fostered and adopted when he was 6 years old here in Alexandria, Jaquan, he played basketball at Prince George's Community College, and now he is in the workforce. I am a mechanical engineer by training. I spent 33 years with the Department of Defense, going from a design engineer all the way up to being the program manager, working on modernization of our defenses, multi-billion-dollar effort that allowed us to live in 7 different states and to meet all types of people. We've briefed 4-star generals. We've met presidents of companies and just have been all over the place with that work. Why am I running? I am running for several reasons. One is based on my experience and my knowledge of this city. And also the fact that I have raised my kids already. I have had my work career now. My wife and I are both retired. We've decided to stay here in the city, so we hope to be here another 30 or 40 years at least. And so, and also just my knowledge of the city. I've been on the Early Education Commission. I was on the Children, Youth, and Families Collaborative Commission. I have worked on developing numerous strategic plans. I have also had the honor to have been elected to the school board in Alexandria and served for 6 years. There, we built 3 new schools. We've developed 6 operating budgets. We put together capital budgets. In fact, we put together one of the largest capital improvements budget that the schools has ever had because of infrastructure issues that we need to point out. Probably my proudest moment there is the relationship that we worked to develop with City Council. We had a lot of joint meetings with cities and schools working on improving that relationship and developing our budgets together. I am now on the Commission for Aging, and so I want to have a lot of focus as a council person on the services that we provide to seniors. By the way, it is Older Citizens Month this month, so you guys have to be nice to me. My key goals and objectives actually goes with what I feel is the most important issue here in Alexandria too, and that is communications. I hope to be that that council person that over communicates everything. My experience, I know that sometimes when you make a decision, there has been weeks, months, sometimes years of effort that goes into that from your staff, from you doing research, from experts and stuff like that. We need to work better to over communicate those things to our public. And that's the counselor that I hope to be. We need to acknowledge the challenges that we have around trying to do things like maintain and retain and increase affordable housing. We need to show where there are limitations from a budget perspective. We need to make sure that we take care of our small business folks. And so I want to over communicate that. I also learned on schools that you could have the best curriculum, you could have the best plan, but if you don't have student support, you don't have parent support, you don't have citizen support, you're going to struggle. And I think that's what we do here in this city too many times. We need to not let national politics take over the work that we have to do. We're too small for that. Everything that we do affects one another. We need to know that good schools helps our businesses. We know that anytime that we disagree, we should be able to disagree and still respect one another. I hope to be that counselor that can do that. I have the time to do that, and I look forward to continuing to serve our city.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chapman, to you, please.
Certainly. Thank you, Seminary Ridge, for the opportunity to address you tonight. And thank you for being engaged in our local elections. I'm a fourth generation Alexandrian, born and raised here in the city. And so serving in my hometown is very personal to me. I've served on city council for the last 8 years since 2012. Before that, I was very involved in our community, including my civic association, Taylor Run Citizens Association. And so I know some of the work that folks are doing behind the scenes to make these civic associations run. And I also believe that I have a unique perspective here in the city that I can bring to city council. And I believe that I've shown leadership over the last 8 years and want to continue the work. And that's why I'm asking for another 3-year term. As we know, this last year has been very difficult. For me, I am a owner of a small business, and so the tourism industry got hit really hard, and so did my business. I'm also a new parent. I have a 15-month-old, which is why I'm wearing these headphones, so I don't wake him up. And so I know what it is and what it's like over the last year to kind of juggle work and family and other kind of civic duties as well. And I know everybody watching this video has had their own set of challenges over the last 14 months. But I know that we working together, you engaged residents, civic associations, and elected officials and policymakers working together over the next few months and next few years can really bring Alexandria back from the pandemic and also push us forward to a greater, better future. That's more inclusive of all of us, that really engages our residents and our business community members. And so, you know, in that, I think we need to stand together. During my term, I want to really focus on that recovery. Having a council member that's been on council during the pandemic, I think gives insight to some of the things there that have been long-standing issues in the city that need to be remedied during our recovery. I think we also have the opportunity, as a number of folks have talked about it, the damage that we have seen from the economic damage from businesses, the issues around housing affordability, and one of the biggest issues is fixing our infrastructure. We have to have the capacity of council members who have been there to work on these things. I'm happy to lead the advisory committee that is going to be working with a bunch of residents as we monitor the work that staff is doing around fixing our stormwater infrastructure. You know, that was a focus of mine as we were coming through these discussions. And so I jumped up and said, hey, I want to help lead that effort and work with our residents as well. One of the things that my background is in education. And so, of course, one of the things that's very important to me coming out of the recovery is getting our kids not only back in school safely, but caught back up. We know that we had at least a year of loss for a number of our kids in our schools. And so we have to have a plan, I believe, over the next 2 to 3 years to get kids back up and on schedule. And so working closely with ACPS, I have a history of that. As Bill talked about, council and school board have had a good relationship in the past, and we need to bring that back for the benefit of our kids and our families. And so those are a couple of issues. Again, being a business owner, I think is key for me in terms of my perspective on council and some of the work I want to do going forward. One of the things I want to do is not only just look at the recovery in the next few years, but start to really look 10, 15 years down the line and say, hey, how do we situate ourselves as Alexandria coming out of this pandemic to really boost up who we are from an economic development standpoint? One of the ways that we've done this in the past that I want to rekindle is restarting Alexandria's Small Business Recovery Task Force, but also looking at our economic sustainability work plan. About almost 11 years ago, we had a group of folks get together to put together a report about how Alexandria could situate itself within the region and really draw in and retain small, medium-sized, and large businesses. A lot has changed in those 11 years since we produced that report. And so we need to go back to that, get a number of the new stakeholders involved again, get community members involved again, and talk about how Alexandria's changed, and then talk about how we need to situate ourselves with things coming here like Amazon and Virginia Tech, the Potomac Yard Metro, hopefully the redevelopment of something like Landmark Mall and Carlisle, and talk about how we situate ourselves to take benefit of that, not only for the businesses, but also for the residents. So I look forward to our questions tonight.
All right, thank you very much. Next up is Mr. Nirenberg.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to participate in this evening's forum. And thank you to all who are viewing this forum as well from your homes. Allow me a moment to tell you about myself, why I'm running, and what I plan to do if elected. One spring day, 22 years ago, my wife Lori and I put a contract in to buy a house in North Arlington. We then headed over to one of the playgrounds here in Alexandria for our son and daughter to play with some friends. I knew something was up because Lori called her father 5 times while we were at the playground. At the end of the day, as we walked back to our car with 2 exhausted kids in tow, Lori turned to me. "We can't do it," she said. "Can't do what?" "We can't buy that house. Arlington may be a nice place to live, but Alexandria is a community." So we raced down Glebe Road, withdrew our contract, and a couple of months later, found our home here in Northridge, where we've been ever since. Now, Lori had it right about community, and I should have come to that conclusion myself. Because you see, I grew up in a small town in upstate New York, where community was everything. My dad was a country lawyer who at age 37 suffered a heart attack. He survived, but he was limited in his ability to work. When I was 14, he sat me down one evening and said, "We're doing okay. I'll be able to pay for your education and both of your younger brothers. So as the oldest, that means if you want to go to college, you're going to have to figure out a way to pay for it yourself." So I got to work, started a paper route, delivered groceries, worked in a supermarket, painted interiors, bussed tables, and while in college, waited on tables here at the Key Bridge Marriott. Started my own business, selling premium candies at a roadside stand. The day I graduated from college, I drove down to what were then the hamlets, Alexandria, found a job on the Hill, and then returned to waiting tables at the Marriott to make a little extra money to help pay for law school. And I was able to go to law school. I attended GWU at night while I worked on the Hill. After finishing my degree and working on the Hill a few more years, I then left. And for the past 25 years, I've practiced law at 2 DC international law firms. But getting back to Alexandria, Lori and I settled here for many of the same reasons that likely attracted you. A tight-knit and caring community, distinct and diverse neighborhoods, and a history and charm that attracts visitors from around the globe. It's a community which recognizes that our diversity is a source of our strength, and where everyone counts, no matter one's income, one's age, race, ethnic background, religion, or from where someone came. With a government traditionally focused on quality of life for all who live here, and making consensus and reaching consensus on major decisions. However, over the past few years, we've seen our government here in our city lose its way, pushing divisive policies such as building adult housing on school grounds when the focus should be on reopening schools and addressing the learning gap created by the pandemic. Eliminating traffic lanes on major roadways when the goal should be to alleviate traffic. Promoting density when our schools and infrastructure can't keep up with the population we already have, and without any plan as to how to manage the population growth. Bulldozing trees when we have too little green space as it is, and continuing to raise taxes when so many households and businesses here in our city are struggling through the pandemic. So I decided I could not stand on the sidelines and watch our city so dramatically transform and lose what makes it unique. So I filed 2 weeks ago tomorrow to run for city council. The thing is, the issues before our council are not partisan. They're common sense. So if elected, I will bring a different perspective to the council. And from the outset, I'll propose stopping all efforts to put adult housing on school grounds, restoring 4 lanes to Seminary Road and ending the road diet, taking a breather on more density until we have a plan as to how we can have our infrastructure and schools will handle population, and start a discussion about returning to wards or district for half of our councils so neighborhoods have representation. Alexandria is a great city. It's a unique one at that, and Lori and I feel lucky to have raised our two children here with our dog Presley and our new pandemic puppy Gatsby. There's no reason Alexandria can't continue to be a special place, but that will take a city council that focuses on quality of life issues, takes account of viewpoints that are diverse, and which seeks to bring us together as a community as opposed to dividing us with divisive policies. So at the end of the day, that is the big issue before us. That is.
Thank you very much. Lastly, Bill Rossello, I'm glad you could join us. Finally made it work. So recover the rules. You have 5 minutes to introduce yourself. Tell us why you're running and who you are. You need to unmute, Bill.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Joe, for your patience. My link wasn't working, so 25 minutes we finally got me on. But I'm Bill Rossello. I've been in Alexandria since 1988. My wife and I were married here. Her family has been here since 1966, so we have deep roots in Alexandria. We've lived in Old Town, we've lived in North Ridge, and we now have lived in Seminary Hill near all of you for the last 14 years. So I know this city well, and I know Seminary Ridge pretty well as also. And my two sons spent all their growing up time here in Alexandria, and they attended the public schools. So I also know the schools well. I've worked as a management consultant for 35 years. In my work, I've served companies of all sizes, including Fortune 500 companies like Coca-Cola and Marriott, GE, McDonald's, and AT&T. And even Wall Street banks like JP Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs. I've also worked with a lot of companies much smaller than that you've never heard of. So I know something about business. More relevant to the office that I'm seeking here as a city council member, I've also spent much of my career advising government agencies at all levels. At the local level, I've served 24 city and county governments and school districts across the country. And I've worked on issues of management, operations, budgeting, and importantly, meeting community expectations for quality service. So I know how cities and school districts are supposed to run. I've also served for 7 years on our city budget committee, reviewing the annual budget and advising city council, going through that long 3-4 month period with them, working lots of meetings to advise them on the annual budget. So I have a long history of tracking how the city plans and how it spends our money. And for 5 years, I was an advocate for youth sports and better athletic facilities as the leader of the Alexandria Soccer Association. We built 5 new fields with turf and lights that tripled our capacity. So I spent a lot of time working with city council to get that done. And I started the first scholarship program there for vulnerable youth in our largest youth sports organization. Currently, I'm a member of the Citizens Advisory Board to the Commonwealth's Attorney, where we focus on equity issues in the criminal justice system. I'm also on the board of the Seminary Hill Association. I'm a delegate to the Alexandria Federation of Civic Associations. I am a huge advocate of civic associations. They represent our neighborhoods, and we need to listen to our neighborhoods a lot more going forward. I'm running because I think it's time for a change, and here's what I think we need to do. First, we need to restore integrity, transparency, and accountability at City Hall, making residents and neighborhoods the central focus of our government once again. Elected officials need to be genuine and forthright and not tell you what you want to hear and then vote against you. We need to promote responsible development and more sensible approaches to affordable housing. I'd like to see us narrow our focus to vulnerable people who have roots in the city or would like to return because they grew up here. Maintaining the fabric of the community and keeping our historic families here is a top priority for me. Third, we need to accelerate school construction to meet the burgeoning enrollment demands without co-location of housing on school campuses and without losing the athletic fields and the open space that are so valued by our neighborhoods. And we need to stop kicking the can down the road on major infrastructure projects and end the flooding that occurred, in my opinion, because of the city's neglect. We need to get traffic moving again. And as we get back to the office and get kids back to school, I was a leading voice for our seminary neighborhoods in opposition to the Seminary Road Diet, proving through research and analysis that the need for the road diet was completely unfounded. We need to maintain road capacity on the major arterial roads and not let misguided grant applications determine what happens on Upper King Street near Bradley and along the Duke Street corridor. And we need to address major choke points like the one at Duke Street and Telegraph Road. Finally, we need to live our Eco-City pledge for the first time. We can't just rip up stream beds in parks like Taylor Run and Strawberry Run unless we are absolutely certain that the benefits will outweigh the cost of taking down significant portions of our tree canopy. So I'm very optimistic about our future. I love this city. It's been my home for almost my entire adult life. And but that's a little bit about me and why I'm running. And I guess the one thing to remember as you go through the debate tonight or the forum tonight is that experience matters. So please remember that.
Thank you, Bill. And last, but certainly not least with the introductions, Ms. Teklu.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you to the Seminary Ridge community for having us tonight at this forum. My name is Merrone Teklu, and I'm running for Alexandria City Council. I am the daughter of immigrant parents and a product of local public schools. I was born here in Alexandria, raised in Northern Virginia, and I currently live in the West End, right off of Duke Street, right by Landmark Mall. As a student, I was always involved with student government and leadership, whether it was related to a middle school treasurer, a student human rights commission in Fairfax County, senior class officer, a college student government, or organizing for Black Lives Matter. I'm also a proud graduate of the College of William Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. So I've now been my whole life in Virginia. In our local community, I've served as a community manager for IEA Councils on Higher Education, which is a DC-based nonprofit that works to mentor, support, and guide students of first-generation college backgrounds and immigrant or second-generation backgrounds through the college admissions process. I've also served for 8+ years as an advisory board member for the Wegan Ethiopian Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to rebuilding families one child at a time. Professionally, I work as a technology management consultant at a large professional services firm here in Northern Virginia. My day-to-day is focused on solving complex problems for a variety of clients that includes Fortune 500 companies and impacts millions of customers. I believe that I'll bring a fresh, data-driven perspective to our city council and that I can help drive change forward for the future of our city. If elected, I will be focused on ensuring that we amplify the work of activists and organizers that have come before me here in the city. I'm running to help amplify the voices of our community of color, our marginalized and vulnerable community members who are looking to empower our community to realize the promise of equity. And I'm focused on implementing long-term change through innovation strategies. In terms of my vision and priorities for Alexandria over the next 5 years, my hope is that to ensure that for residents, businesses, and visitors, Alexandria is a connected, inclusive, safe, and vibrant city that puts the needs of our community first. And so my first priority on this campaign trail in terms of how we've organized our platform is a focus on youth and community. Ensuring that our students are supported in and out of the classroom will be critical as we rebuild post this pandemic, and ensuring that our city is affordable for our residents. My second priority focuses on innovation and technology, investing in our broadband and public infrastructure, as well as introducing smart technology solutions to optimize our city efficiency. My third priority includes a focus on economy and business. Investing in our minority-owned small businesses and increasing local jobs through private sector partnerships are some of the opportunities that I'm looking to champion, as well as supporting workers' rights and empowering our unions. My fourth priority includes a focus on environment and sustainability, decreasing our greenhouse gas emissions through city investments in affordable transportation, energy efficiency programs, and electric vehicle charging stations. My fifth and final priority is a focus on COVID-19 relief, ensuring the health, safety, and well-being of our Alexandria community in the wake of this pandemic will be top of mind for us, even in 2022. We know that this pandemic, again, has disproportionately affected communities of color, and especially our women who have been leaving our workforce at alarmingly high rates. It will be critical for our city to invest in prioritizing and amplifying these voices as we rebuild our local economy. In closing, we are at a time where we have an opportunity to reimagine life after this pandemic. I'm fighting for a livable Alexandria, and I'm excited to help bring positive change and innovation to our historic city. I look forward to connecting with you, the residents of Seminary Ridge, throughout this campaign, and I hope to earn your support for the June 8th Democratic primary. To learn more about myself and our campaign, you can visit our website, It's www.merroneforcouncil.com. And I look forward to tonight's forum and hearing your questions.
Right. Thank you very much. With that, we will go on to the first question. And a reminder, you'll have 1 minute to answer the question. And Richie will be flashing the cards diligently up there. So the first question will go to Mr. Chapman. And if any of you need me to reread the question when it gets to be your turn, just let me know. But the first question is, the last city council ignored the 13 Alexandria civic associations that all opposed the road diet on Seminary Road. What do you see as the role of civic associations in the city policy making process?
Thank you. Great question. And let's be very clear. I did not ignore that. I was one of the folks that voted against the Seminary Road diet because I did not feel comfortable with that project as is. As it was kind of brought forward, I thought there were some other kind of better options that would have maintained capacity, because again, that's a bigger conversation that we in the city have not had, particularly in the central Alexandria area. And I was proud to bring forward the Central Alexandria Task Force and kind of push the focus of that to get civic associations together to talk about the issue. Again, I've served on the Taylor Run Civic Association for a number of years since buying a house. And so I am truly committed to having our civic associations involved. They need to be involved in the policy making. We need to honestly find a way to not only get the Federation of Civic Associations, but also a gathering of apartment owners who live here in the city, talking to council, hearing from council members, listening, having us listen to them in order to bring good policy forward.
Thank you, Councilman. Same question to you, Mr. Nirenberg.
Yes, thank you very much. Good city government is all about civic engagement. It's about understanding what people in the city feel, what they want, and what they like to have for their neighborhoods. Civic associations are a key part of that. I would pay a special attention to civic associations when the issues affect their neighborhoods, and in general, civic associations on issues that affect the entire city. That's one of the reasons I think we need some wards. We're the only city our size in America that does not have some form of district or ward representation other than 2 cities in California, and those cities have nonpartisan elections. Having wards will give the neighborhoods and the civic associations more of a say, and it'll also make serving in city government more accessible to people in our city. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Rossello, same question.
Oh, thanks. I spoke to this in my opening comments, so you already know how I feel. But I think neighborhoods in Alexandria are what make this city so special. You can find any type of neighborhood you want to find in this city. It is not a homogeneous place by any stretch of the imagination. And so I think it's very important that we do what we can to preserve the neighborhoods. Some neighborhoods want to evolve into something else, which is great. Some neighborhoods don't want to evolve into something else. So, one of the most important things we should do with our neighborhoods is ask them their opinion on issues that affect them deeply and are important to them. What I've been saying on the campaign trail is we have to, stop taking away things that people value and give them the things that they want.
Right. Thank you. Ms. Teklu.
Yes, excellent question. I would say as elected officials, our responsibility is to serve the community that we serve. So I think in terms of the role of civic associations and the dynamic between that and council is that we should be listeners. Yes, we should be asking for folks' opinion, but more importantly, we should be co-designing solutions together. Folks in our neighborhoods, our residents who are most affected by the issue can help determine how to solve those problems, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily always the top-down approach where we have goals that we're trying to meet, proposals, grants that we're trying to achieve without taking a poll in our communities of who will be most impacted and what are the most optimal solutions to solve those complex problems. So I am a big fan, and I've mentioned this a couple different times in a few different forums, on ensuring that we co-design those solutions with our residents and with our community organizations. Yes, our civic associations are a part of that, but then also our other nonprofits and other community organizers who have been doing.
Right. Thank you. And Mr. Campbell.
Yeah, I think probably about 3 weeks into my moving into Alexandria, I joined the Inner City Civic Association. That's more a function because I know that civic associations are where you can find out about your community. You can learn about what's going on. And so that's the first place to go. But I knew to do that. And I also know from my experience on the school board and just my life experience that oftentimes, and it's normally not out of any fault of the civic association, they're nowhere near as diverse as you want them to be. And it's the same with PTAs. And again, it's no fault of the associations, but we need to know that it doesn't have, civic associations don't typically have the diversity that you need. So you need to look for all of the voices of the things that are in terms of being impacted by the decisions that you make. And so I certainly would listen to civic associations and at the same time look for the other voices too that are impacted by the decision.
Thank you. Keeping on kind of starting this one with transportation, next one's transportation driven as well. Given the often combative nature surrounding the Seminary Road Diet, the next big transportation study and project would be the rapid transit lanes on Duke Street. What is your opinion of installing dedicated bicycle lanes on this major east-west thoroughfare during the phase 1 or phase 2 project between Landmark and King Street Metro? Should the city acquire private property to achieve this goal? Starting with Mr. Nirenberg.
Yes, as I'd mentioned in my opening statement, I oppose road diets. I want to see Seminary Road restored. Traffic is bad enough in our city. The city government should be focused on alleviating traffic, not making it worse. So on its face, I would oppose those kind of changes to Duke Street that would require the acquiring of private property or which would reduce travel lanes or parking. I also think it's important in doing that the regional or local civic association and neighborhoods be brought into the discussion and that their opinions be given full account, as well as the other civic associations of the city, since they will be affected. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next is Mr. Rossello.
Yeah, so I'm on record as being for major bike routes, east and west and north and south. We don't need them in every neighborhood or on every street. I think we made a big mistake on Seminary Road when we had an alternative route we could have used up Howard and down Braddock. But as it relates to Duke, I think the same thinking should apply. We need to think about what's the best way to get bicyclists from the west to the east. By the way, how much demand is there for that first? And then, look at things like how do we make it easier for people to get to Eisenhower Avenue, which is a perfect east-west route for bicyclists. In terms of rapid transit on Duke Street, I'm still trying to understand what the demand is for faster bus service. What is the volume of people who are actually going from west down to Old Town? I think most of our residents, when they commute, are leaving Alexandria during the day and coming back in the afternoon. So,
all right, thank you. Ms. Teklu.
Thank you for the question. I live right off of Duke Street, and I'll say that hiking and walking is impossible on that stretch of road. And so I would be in favor of pursuing a multimodal approach to how we approach the Duke Street Transitway project. I'm excited for that. I think it's much needed. Again, many of our community in that area do walk to work, do take the bus, do need that option to get around town from east to west. It's quite difficult. And so I would certainly support that. But I think with the caveat that we must engage the community within that decision-making process. As was already highlighted with the Seminary Road Diet, it should not be something that we don't want to repeat that same process, right? So ensuring that we, again, have co-design solutions as we approach this new project will be critical, but I think it's much needed. And I think the community would support that as well.
All right, thank you. Mr. Campbell.
So having been married for 37 years, my wife and I probably agree on maybe 75% of the issues. We need to over communicate to people, and we need to understand that you're not going to always agree on things, but we need to make sure that we're respectful. We also need to make sure that our civic associations understand where and when you can have the most input. So we need to make sure that our civic association members are on these when you're developing plans and things. We need to make sure that we have representation on those committees. I support our complete streets plan, but certainly we need to be smart as counselors to look at that. And also we need to make sure that our citizens know we're not experts in everything. I had a friend who was an expert on streets from New York City, and he said one of the worst things that you can do in traffic is to stop parallel streets. You know, it's to stop cut through. And so there's things that experts know that we want to listen to and make sure that we inject that in our plans.
All right, thank you. And last on this question, Mr. Chapman, Councilman Chapman.
Certainly, thank you. One of the things I hear from my neighbors around the Duke Street corridor is about the walkability of that area. And I think Ms. Teklu mentioned that in her comments. My idea is to really talk to residents about expanding our sidewalks in that section of that roadway. That gives us a dual benefit, not only make an opportunity for safer pedestrian use, but also, as we know in many towns and cities across America and in Europe, bikes and protected bikeways on sidewalks are an opportunity for bikes to have safety from the road, because we do know that Duke Street is faster than kind of most neighborhood streets, but it also does allow folks to have some safety on that roadway. I was in Germany years ago, and they have sidewalks with a certain lane for bikers and areas for pedestrians. And so if we really want to commit to safety, I think we need to look at investing in our sidewalk infrastructure in this city.
All right, thank you. One more transportation question, and I promise we'll get on to something else. Virginia's Department of Transportation has identified 6 intersections near I-395 as high accident rate areas, all of them in Alexandria's lower income communities, such as West Seminary Road and Mark Center Ave outside of Southern Towers. Would you advocate for federal and state funding to reconfigure the roadway and intersections in this area for traffic safety? First response is from Mr. Rossello.
Well, this is one of the great ironies of the Seminary Road diet, is that on just a mile or two west, where people in more vulnerable communities live, the safety problems are dramatic, starting with Library Road, going across 395 onto the other side. And but we spent so much time trying to make an already safe road safe. So would I do that? Absolutely. But before I take the federal and state money, I would say, can we fix this ourselves? Because it would be faster if we could fix it with our own money. We have underinvested in our capital budget for decades. And what we need to do is go find these, where are the intersections that we need to fix, not wait for the repaving schedule, which is what we do today, to determine whether we should fix an intersection or not, and just get on it. Let's start with our own money. If we can't afford it, then sure, let's go to federal and state government, see if we can get grants.
Right. Thank you. Ms. Teklu.
Yes, I would support looking into state and federal funding, but similar to what Bill had mentioned, looking within our own budgeting process and see what we can take on as new capital improvement projects. This is a big issue. I think, regarding the Seminary I-395 area, we did a great job in putting that walkway to provide an option for pedestrians and bikers to cross that area safely. We should have follow a similar approach for the Landmark area. I mean, Landmark Development Project is going to be kicking off quite soon. We're going to have many residents who now can't really walk in that area, right? You can't walk, you can't bike. What if you live around that area? It's quite difficult and unsafe. So I'm thinking both pedestrians and also the cars that are getting onto I-395 during traffic time. Post-pandemic, it's going to, we're going to continue to see some traffic issues related to that. And I think it is a big area of improvement for us, especially with the new development coming to Landmark.
All right, thank you. Mr. Campbell.
I think at all times we need to look at any state and federal funding that may be available to support some of the things that we need to do in our city. And so I absolutely would look for that. We also need to realize that we are in the tri-state area. We're in a popular area. We know that in terms of traffic, we need to make sure that we work jointly with DC and Maryland on our streets, and that we have a complete program in terms of transportation. We want it to be multimodal, of course. And so I certainly, if there are federal or state dollars that are available, we need to make sure that we explain what all the restrictions are, but certainly you prefer to use those dollars versus any tax dollars from your citizens, because you want to use those dollars for even more critical things.
All right, thank you. Councilman Chapman.
Certainly. When looking at the upcoming landmark plan, it is going to change the walkability of that area. But I think we don't wait for development to come to change that walkability. I think, as Bill mentioned it, but I'll put a finer point on this. We need to be changing our paving schedule to focus in on those major intersections where we do have problems, and make that a part of how we line up what repaving is done in the city. Then we are going to address key area issues. And so if we do that, we then can also look, as people have said, at grant opportunities and funding, because we do want to extend the taxpayers' dollar. And you do that not by putting their money first, but being able to put their money after other opportunities. And so I think you look at the opportunity to bring in other dollars as you do these projects, because as was already mentioned, we have a number of things to do in our capital improvement program.
And thank you. Last is Mr. Nirenberg, to fix Seminary Road at 395.
Great, thank you. Yes, I would support seeking state and federal support through grants, but also as a general policy, I think the city needs to adopt having public disclosure of grant applications before those applications are made, so the community is made aware of what is potentially down the road. And so that we do not end up in a situation where we have effectively legislating by grant applications and grant receipts. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Presently, the review team for the stream restoration alternatives for Strawberry Run will only include city staff, the city's EPC committee, and probably the city's contractors for Taylor and Strawberry Runs. Will you support including a scientific representative chosen by the Strawberry Run residents for the review team, or alternatively having an objective third party conduct the review to assure its results are credible? And the first response is from Ms. Teklu.
Thank you. I would opt for an independent review. But I would also like to acknowledge, what I mentioned earlier in the sense of ensuring that we have co-design solutions with the residents that are most impacted. So related to Strawberry Run, we have seen a need for scientific data to back our decision-making related to this restoration projects. That has been a continuous theme on some of our most recent efforts in the city. So ensuring that we have that third party to conduct an independent assessment would be what I would most support. Acknowledging that, that may be a new approach that we can pilot for future restoration projects as well in the city. But at this moment, I would be of support of an independent review process for that, so that we can have someone with the environmental science background to help us determine how we might be able to reach our decreasing pollution goals and alternative solutions.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell.
Yes, I mean, I would certainly support an independent party in that review. I don't see why we would need to limit what we're trying to do. I think everyone has the same objective. We want to make sure that, well, number one, that do nothing is not an option. And then I think in terms of the objectives, we ought to be very clear on those. And maybe we need to step back and make sure that folks are clear on what our objectives, and then certainly and make sure that we put together the right team in there, because again, city councilors, I don't know that we have any experts on stream restoration. And so we need to make sure that we have the right people, whether it's our staff or whether it's independent experts. So I would certainly support that.
Thank you. Councilman Chapman.
Thank you. As a current council member, to this question, I'll answer it this Tuesday. What I'll do after we get off tonight, I'll email the EPC chair, see if they're open to, or how they would integrate community members into the decision-making process that they're going to go under as they work with staff, and make sure they include residents who want to be involved. Second, on Tuesday, when we have our next council meeting, I'll speak on this issue so that we know this council can get residents involved in this issue because it is an ongoing issue right now. And so it's not something we have to wait until January to do. We can do that as a council member. I can do that now, and I'll take those steps. Secondly, to the third party, along with the colleagues that are here, what we can do if we take opportunities to involve residents now, we could have a third party come on board when this new council takes seats. So individuals that are here on the call that support a third party can be involved in that process as well, because I do think there's an opportunity there to really bring outside insight to how we look at these issues.
Thank you. Mr. Nirenberg.
Great. Well, thank you for the question. It's clear that there are problems with the restoration project from 2010. We need to understand what those problems were, see what we've learned and what we can learn, and then apply those lessons going forward. Let me make 3 points. Is that an independent, disinterested third party should be enlisted to assess the situation and make recommendations going forward. Second, the goal should be to establish faith in the process going forward. And third, whatever is to be done, there needs to be a consensus built in the community. That's been one of the hallmarks for the entire time I'd lived in Alexandria, is government seeking to build consensus, and we should do it in this case as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And lastly, Mr. Rossello.
Yeah, I think your question reflects an all too common feeling among residents that they feel like they're at odds with their own city government on issues that are very important to them. And in this case, the reason is they did this project once before in 2010, and it was a miserable failure. And it was poorly designed. And after a few storms, everything that they had built had washed away. And we probably did more environmental damage by constructing that project than if we had done nothing at all. So, I'm not as worried about the EPC. I think they've come out against just going right into these stream restoration projects without the proper analysis. We need the analysis both here and at Taylor Run, and I would be fully in favor of an independent review.
All right, thank you so much. Next question. And for this one, we'll start with Mr. Campbell. Would you vote in favor of eliminating single-family zoning in Central Alexandria, the West End, or citywide in order to add more housing and increase density? Please explain why or why not.
Now, I don't think I'd be in favor of eliminating single-family zoning. Clearly, if if folks own property and we can have, you know, if they sell that property and they want to build multi homes there, I think that should be allowed, but not eliminating single family housing. At the same time, obviously, if we want to maintain our diversity here in the city, we need to continue to look at all of our options around trying to make sure that we have as many housing options as we possibly can. And so, but no, I'm not in favor of eliminating single family zoning.
Thank you, Councilman Chapman.
So at the outset, I'm not for eliminating it. I think, you know, allowing owners of land to make some of their own decisions on their property, I think is really key. And so a full out elimination of it, I think, kind of pushes against that. You know, if landowners don't want to, a collective of landowners don't want to make big improvements on their land, I think they should be allowed to do so and have the culture that supports that. I do also believe that we have enough areas of our community that are still to be developed, have plans to be developed. And so there shouldn't be a rush to do away with the single family zoning. We do have what we call a development crescent in the city that has transit, walkable opportunities, amenities, and it's perfect for the high density development that we have. And so I feel it's a little bit too early to be considering that as a full city policy.
Thank you. Mr. Nirenberg.
Thank you. I do not believe we should eliminate single-family housing zoning. The choice of diverse and distinct neighborhoods is one of the things that makes our city unique and special. Our neighbors have considerably more land available for more development. We have the most density of any area in this region, and we're one of the top 15 most dense cities in the entire country. For example, we have only 29% of our land zoned for single family housing zoning. Fairfax County, where 1 in 5 residents live, has 77% of its land zoned for single family housing. Arlington has 42%, and even Washington, D.C. has more with 36%. Another point is Alexandria comprises a minuscule 0.4% of this region's land. To put it into context, if this region were Nats Park, we would take up 12 yards of the warning track. It's not feasible for us in Alexandria to be able to address regional housing issues in terms of affordability. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rossello.
Yeah, I'm absolutely opposed to changing our single family home zoning at all. I think Mr. Nirenberg made the case about density, which I've made many times before. Much of our single family housing in Alexandria is very modest housing. It's not the big mega mansions. We don't really have much of that here. And in fact, Seminary Hill zip code, which includes Seminary Ridge, was rated as the 10th most diverse zip code in the state of Virginia. So diversity is not really an argument for changing zoning. So I attended the housing summit, the city's housing summit last January of 2020. The city seems to be modeling itself after Minneapolis. Totally different city, as we found out with some of the police things going on there, but it's also very different when it comes to housing. 70% of their housing is single family homes. Only 30% of our land area is covered by single family homes. Very different.
Thank you. And last responses from Ms. Teklu.
Thank you. I would not be in favor of eliminating single family zoning. And for the concern around affordability and diversity in our communities, that is one of the key issues that I've worked to champion on this campaign. We know that we have an affordable housing crisis and that this pandemic has only highlighted that. And so when we talk about tools in the toolbox for addressing affordable housing, one of them is density waivers. I would say I'm in support of that. And in addition to that, I would also like to explore the concept of inclusionary zoning. There have been many other cities across the nation that have utilized this approach to address this crisis. Instead of having ad hoc agreements with new developers or redevelopment in the city, instead having a dedicated percentage that is allocated to affordable units, could be one of the approaches we use in the future moving forward to address this crisis. But, as mentioned, I would not be in favor of eliminating the single family zoning. I think there's other approaches we can use to address our affordable housing crisis.
All right, thank you. And that goes right into the next question, which is, what approach do you support for increasing affordable housing in Alexandria? For example, should there be government-owned and managed housing, or should the city continue to grant developers variances in return for temporary, in return for temporary affordable units? So we'll start with Councilman Chapman.
Yeah, so I'm glad the way you kind of phrased the question. The fact that we have to do exchanges with developers for affordable housing is something that I've hated since I've been on council. It focus, our average takeaway from some of these projects is 3 to 5% of a project. Across the river, they see upwards of 20% in a project for affordability. And so inclusionary zoning is something that I've been fighting for. The fight, though, is not at the local level. It's not with the folks here on the screen. It's not with other council members. It's just the state. The state needs to understand that areas in Northern Virginia need inclusionary zoning as part of their toolkit. They've been very hesitant to give us that local power because Richmond likes to keep all the power itself. But we need that opportunity. We shouldn't be begging developers for a little bit of affordability here and there with new projects. It has not worked for our city. It's unfortunate that we have to work with them the way we do, and we have our hands tied behind our back when we're doing this. And so we really need Richmond to allow us that opportunity to bring in inclusionary zoning.
All right, thank you. Mr. Nirenberg.
Yes. Affordable housing is a community responsibility. No one should be forced to leave our city because of increasing housing costs. The question, of course, is what, where, and who. We know, to start with, adult housing on school grounds is not the answer. Plus, it's not authorized under state law. And we know that continuing to increase effective property taxes are making it more expensive for homeowners, not less. But as Mr. Rossello had spoken earlier, the focus needs to be on Alexandria residents, those who work here, and those who have ties to our city. It's also important to keep in mind, as I had mentioned earlier, that Alexandria is too small to solve affordable housing issues in a metro area, and it would be a mistake for us to try by taking on more than our fair share. We need to ask more of our developers, who, by the way, should be asked to do carbon offsets as well. And we have to keep in mind that if we're going to have more density, we need a plan for the infrastructure and for the schools, and we shouldn't be promoting density until that plan is reached and in effect. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rossello.
Well, first, we got to get the facts. The facts have been elusive. It's hard to get data out of the Office of Housing, always an excuse, but we don't know how many people who live in Alexandria right now are applying for affordable housing. We just don't know. Second, I want to narrow our focus to those people, those who live or work here, and those who have a historic tie to the community. Preference policies, some people have criticized me, said it's against the Fair Housing Act of 1968, but there are a number of communities that have carefully crafted preference policies that are not being challenged. And those include Cambridge, Massachusetts, Seattle, Oakland, San Francisco, Santa Monica, and Austin, Texas. So we can't just keep building our way out of this challenge. Newport Village, we're about to build something with 300 units, market rate, and we're only going to get 12 affordable housing units, tearing down 23 townhouses to do it, and creating a lot more kids going to the schools, creating even more pressure there.
Thank you. Ms. Teklu.
Yes, I would like to start by saying, again, we do have an affordable housing crisis on our hands here in Alexandria. And many of our community of colors are feeling the brunt of this. And so when we talk about affordable housing, I mentioned earlier my position on inclusionary zoning, and thank you, Councilman Chapman. I would agree. I think we need to push Richmond to help us pursue this as a regional approach to this issue, because again, like was mentioned, it is a regional issue, but we have to do what we can locally to address it because our communities need us. This is a time of crisis, and this pandemic has only highlighted this issue. And I would like to also point out, in addition to this conversation around affordable housing, we need to think about the folks who have been displaced in this pandemic, who've lost their jobs, lost their income, lost their healthcare, and are losing their homes. At Southern Towers here in the West End, we've seen over 400 evictions be filed since the beginning of this pandemic in March 2020. That does not align with our community values. That does not align in our vision for equity for all in the city. So as we think about this, we should also utilize our COVID funds to help rental assistance programs and those who are most vulnerable during this time.
All right, thank you. And last on this question is Mr. Campbell.
I think every one of the counselor candidates have talked about diversity being perhaps Alexandria's #1 strength. And if we really truly want to maintain diversity, we have to have various housing options. And as the counselor who's hoping to over communicate, one of the things that we have to acknowledge is that we're trying to inject compassion into capitalism. And it is an extremely hard thing to do. No one just gives away anything. There are not developers that just give away money. The federal government has not done a good job with public housing. So we need to first acknowledge the challenge that we have of trying to inject this compassion into capitalism. And I think that we need to certainly use every option that we can to try to maintain it, because there's a little bit of capitalism in all of us. And so it's a difficult thing that we're undertaking, and we need to use every tool possible.
All right, thank you. Next question is regarding the boards and commissions within the city. And how would you make the boards, the commissions, and the committees more representative of Alexandria's diverse communities and neighborhoods? Would you support a requirement that Central Alexandria and the West End be given as many voting seats as the East End of the city? So we'll start with Councilman Chapman on this one. Actually, I apologize. We'll start with Mr. Nirenberg.
Thank you very much. So I've been a candidate for less than 2 weeks, and this is one of the issues I haven't looked at. So it is one of the issues I will look at. But I do think it gets to a key point, which is we are looking at a city right now where people do not have faith in the government that we have, that they are looking for a return to common sense. So anything our city can do to increase input from its citizens, to tap the great resources of our city, the diverse resources, and all different portions of the city, I think would be a benefit. Because at the end of the day, is that we have two choices here. We could continue with divisive policies like we've seen, like road diets and housing on schools and plowing over parks, or we could go back to the tradition of bringing together the community and looking to have consensus on opinions. The board should be structured with that, pardon me, with that in mind. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Rossello.
Yeah, I don't know where to start with boards and commissions, but I think the biggest issue we have, well, we probably have too many of them. We have so many, some of them probably could be combined and simplified. We don't have enough diversity on our boards and commissions. And the reason is we have a lot of the same people from one board who, people are on one board, then they're the representative to another committee, and then they're the representative to another committee. Before you know it, there's somebody who's on 3 boards and commissions and has undue influence over it all. So the geographical aspect to your question, as well as the diversity aspect of the question, we have to do better on both. When we do have a geographical requirement on the board, it's usually east of Quaker and west of Quaker. Well, that's not very specific. There are a lot of different neighborhoods west of Quaker, and there are a lot of different neighborhoods east of Quaker. We need to do better.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Teklu.
Yes, I mean, I think what was mentioned already is that we do have some ways to improve in diversifying our boards and commissions. One is just letting people know how they can apply, right? If folks don't know about the application process, then they're already removed from the opportunity to serve. So how can we meet our community where they are? Folks that may not be as plugged in, maybe they are not receiving our 311 alerts, no matter how great they are, they're not opted in. So how can we take an on-the-ground approach to recruiting more diversity on our boards of commission? I'd be open to a geographical requirement or perhaps even, age diversity as well. When I think about our boards and commissions, I also think about how can we amplify our youth voice here in the city, whether that's representation or representative, similar to what our ACPS school board utilizes in terms of student representatives, or a whole new youth board to help advocate for youth issues in the city. I think there's a lot of conversation to be had on this topic, and I'd certainly would like to see us address more diversity on boards and commissions here.
Super, thank you. Mr. Campbell.
Again, I've had the pleasure to live in several different states and lots of cities. And I will tell you, I believe that Alexandria has more boards and commissions and desires around community input than any city that I've ever lived in. I don't believe we have any restrictions in terms of geographic. We certainly have goals around our the geography. Certainly we need to do better around the diversity on our boards and our commissions. And that is a difficult thing. Again, having served on the school board, you realize that it is just a difficult historical thing to get more people involved that have been historically under-involved and underserved. And so we need to continue our effort there. I think with our equity officer now can certainly help that, and our focus on equity can certainly help that. But I believe that the city has a strong desire towards engagement.
All right, and thank you so much. And last on this question is Councilman Chapman.
Sure. So I don't think we have too many boards. I think that's an initial way that we get people involved in this community. And so, limiting the number of boards that we have limits those opportunities. I do think we need to be much more responsible around our liaisons. Those are those positions where people will be a liaison to another board. We need to see what the only necessary liaison positions that we have, so we don't have people kind of controlling a number of different areas. As it relates to our data and our diversity, I think one of the challenges that we've seen is that when we select commission members, they don't have to give us their background data. That's not something we can force out of them. And so, collecting that data has been tough, and being able to see where our gaps are. And so we are trying to work on that, trying to collect data, trying to implore our commissioners to give us their background data so that we can have a better understanding of who these individuals are across the city. I think you raise a great point with regional opportunities. We need to add these into the boards and commissions that we have, not cut them.
Thank you. The next question is, and we'll start with Mr. Rossello on this one, is would you support term limits for members of city council? If yes, how many terms? If not, why not?
So how many terms did Dell serve?
11.
Yeah, I think 10. No, she served with distinction for many, many years. I don't mean to pick on Dell, but somebody asked me that question. What would you want your legacy to be when you leave? And they mentioned Del Pepper, and I said, well, if I serve as long as Del Pepper, I'll be retiring from the council at age 98. So, but testament to her ability to keep it going for a long, long time. I think I'm not in favor of term limits. So I would probably be in favor of term limits on the boards and commissions, particularly in the chair roles. I think some of them already have that, but I would not be in favor of term limits. We have elections. We want to get somebody not to be on the board or not to be on city council anymore, not to be the mayor anymore. We can do that every 3 years.
Thank you. Ms. Teklu.
Thank you for the question. I would actually support term limits on city council. The number that I would land on is hard to come up with. If I had to say a number, 4 or 5, but I say that because, you know, I want Councilman Chapman to come in and keep his term going. But then also, I do think that it's important. I mean, we have this at different levels of government, as we all know, and state and federal, we do have term limits, and there's a reason for that. It's to ensure that we have accurate representation of the community at that moment, and that different folks get an opportunity to serve that community. So in terms of diversifying folks that are of different perspectives, different backgrounds, different walks of life, I would be an advocate for that, but that's not to say that I'm the only voice in that. And, you know, that would be up for a vote. So as it stands right now, I'd be open to limiting city council terms.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell?
Yeah, thanks. No, I would not support term limits in terms of the elected officials. Again, you vote every 3 years. I think I would consider taking a look at staggered terms, both for school board as well as city council. I think there's some legitimate concerns around the experience that you want to retain on your in your elected officials. So no to limits, and I know we do have limits on our boards and commissions, but I would be welcome to looking at you know, staggered terms, and also perhaps some limits on spending for city council candidates. I think that perhaps would even the playing field some, and perhaps add to our diversity. You know, when you can, you know, raise $100,000 and someone else is spending 5,000, there's probably a discrepancy there that's hard to overcome. So,
Thank you. Councilman Chapman.
As the person that would be coming back with the longest tenure on city council, I've always felt that the residents are the people that are going to tell me when it's time to go. I fully put that power in them. And so here I am asking for folks to vote, working for that vote. If the community tells me no, I'm going to understand that my time is up. We've seen folks be voted out. I'm going to be, if elected, we'll have 3 new folks coming to the council. I think you're going to need a balance of experienced people in elected office, but also new blood to be able to balance out a council. The best councils I've been a part of or seen work have that balance. As it relates to life changes, life limits people's terms. We've seen folks like Tim Levain leave office and because of life changes. And so, you know, life and our residents will limit those terms naturally. And so I don't think we need to necessarily set pre-described limits because that's going to challenge the concept of keeping something going and keeping some type of knowledge on the council.
Thank you. And last response is from Mr. Nirenberg.
Yes, I agree with Councilman Chapman on that. I do not think we should have term limits. We should leave it for the voters to determine and the council members themselves. And there is a benefit to having new blood, but also people with experience. But I do want to take this opportunity to talk a little bit more about wards. Our city had wards until 1950. They were eliminated as part of the Jim Crow era and made all at large. As I had mentioned, we are the only city our size that I've found that does not have wards or district, except for 2 in California that have nonpartisan elections. Wards will ensure that neighborhoods have representation, that people will have an individual on the council they know they could call to take care of neighborhood and area concerns. But also it will make serving on the council more accessible. Right now, all of us have to run in a 160,000 population district. If you divide it into thirds and had half of the members sitting on in wards, that would be cut in a third. You'd have a 53,000 person district, which is much more manageable. It'll bring more people into the process. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. The next question is, as you know, there is a perception that the current city council lacks transparency. Would you support signing a pledge to uphold specific ethical standards and support full transparency in city business, including making all texts and discussions between council members and staff public under FOIA? So we'll start with Ms. Teklu on this question.
No, I would not sign that pledge. I believe that was already sent to me, actually, and I did not sign that. But what I do appreciate about this conversation related to transparency is, backing our proposals and our new projects in the city with data-driven decision-making. That has been a key issue related to many of our different city programs and initiatives that have come up across, over the last couple of years here in Alexandria. So when it comes to transparency related to our decisions and why we make them and why we are prioritizing particular initiatives over others, I believe that should be backed with data, and that should be readily available to our constituents. Whether that's through the online dashboards that we provide already as part of the city. Some of that information is not real accurate or recent. So doing, I would say, our due diligence and ensuring that what we're populating online is the latest and greatest data related to city
Just real
projects.
quick, just to go on, how does having more data help with ethical standards and transparency?
Well, I would say in terms of transparency and ethical standards, it lets us have a baseline, right? By providing more data on what we're actually creating decisions on and what pilots we want to introduce into the city, that will help us at least have some benchmarks, some understanding of the current state so that it is laid out for the public.
Okay.
That would be my perspective on that.
All right, thank you. Mr. Campbell.
Of course, I haven't been elected before. I'm familiar with the sunshine laws, and we also every year as an elected official, you have to provide economic statements, and also there's campaign donation statements that you have to fill out every quarter. And so I think there are adequate protections on the books. I think we need to, again, if we over communicate, we need to also realize that just because a decision may not go the way that you wanted to go, that doesn't mean that there was something unethical that occurred by that elected body. And so I think there is enough ethics checks in place for our elected officials.
Okay. Councilman Chapman.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate the question, but I will say we do sign an ethics pledge. I'm not sure if folks are aware of that. If any of these folks get on council, we will have to sign a ethics pledge the day we're installed. School board does that as well. And what's more, city employees do that. And so this has been something that we've done at least since 2016. And it's something that I think the council, each member of the council stands behind, signing an ethics pledge to show this community that we're serious about ethics. As Bill laid out, there's a number of other different things that the state makes us do to kind of talk about ethics and talk about accessibility. And I also say to the second part of the question, texts are available. You can see what's in my city phone if you FOIA us. And so those things are public. And frankly, if you come to me and ask about certain texts in certain meetings, I don't have a problem showing folks. And so, I don't have a problem being transparent. I know I am here to serve you. And so however we make that happen, we can do that. So, and hopefully in this next term, we can have greater conversations around us communicating what we're doing around ethics and, the fact that we do a regular pledge.
All right, thank you. Mr. Nirenberg.
Yes, I would. Let me make 3 points. First, faith and trust in government is an essential component to maintaining, building our community. Second, FOIAs in general should be easier to obtain, and residents should not need an attorney to dig through them. And third, it's the residents' government. They have a right to know what's going on. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And last response to Mr. Rossello.
Yeah, so this is the first plank of my of my platform, integrity and transparency. Yeah, you know, I think the Seminary Road situation, you know, illuminated to me that, at least in that case, that there was something wrong. Turned out there was something very wrong with the way the city handled that. I wouldn't be running if it were just for that. What I saw was a pattern of these things happening, whether it was the slaughterhouse, whether it's the data around affordable housing from the Office of Housing, a lot of things in TNES. So we have at least one elected official who believes that if it's not illegal, it's not unethical. Our pledge is too vague. We need more specificity. We actually need rules. Residents shouldn't have to do extensive research or have to FOIA the city over and over again just to get to the truth.
Okay, thank you. And this is the last question for this evening. You've all done very well and appreciate your time. But the last question is regarding school resource officers. And do you support the City Council's recent decision to eliminate funding for the school resource officers, despite the fact that the Alexandria School Board supported keeping them within the schools? And with that, we'll start with Mr. Chapman. Mr.
Sure.
Campbell, I'm sorry, Mr. Campbell.
You want me to go?
Yes, please.
Okay. You know, this is really less that question. It's more an issue of how the budgets are done. That's probably one of those that should have not been in the city's budget. That should be something that the schools budget for and plans for. I do not support the way that the SROs were removed. I do think that that should have been an independent school's decision. The schools, I feel, while they voted on it, they knew that it was not in their budget. And so that was more of a process issue than anything. At the same time, we've had SROs that have done positive things in our schools. But then when you look at the data for Black and brown kids, it has not been good, even though you can have ideal scenarios. And so, but the number one thing is we need to make sure of safety. And I think that decision should have been left with the schools.
All right, thank you. Councilman Chapman.
Sure, I appreciate the question. As somebody who did vote against it, I voted first to try to get my colleagues on council to understand that there's a bigger conversation here that needs to happen with the schools. I think Mr. Campbell is right. You know, this is not the best way to do this. You know, we need to understand if we are going to be part of an MOU with the school system, we need to be able to have open conversation about any issue that comes up. You know, council looked at reimagining public safety, and we wanted to do that throughout the city and throughout city agencies and city partners, and that included ACPS. But the conversations with ACPS, regardless of who's to blame to make those conversations happen, they never happened. And so this position that we took is going to push that conversation in this next year as we continue to talk about how we reimagine safety, but we have safe schools where people and students and parents feel safe. I had a number of parents that came to me, a number of students that came to me questioning our SROs. And so individual work that SROs do, it should be held up, but we should have a system where all of our
Thank you. Sorry, I had to cut you off on that. Mr. Nirenberg.
Mr. Chapman can have a couple of my minutes if he likes. I agree with Mr. Campbell. I did not support the council's decision, and I do not support defunding our police or reducing our public safety budget. And if Mr. Chapman, if you'd like a couple more minutes, few seconds, please take them.
So I'll leave that up to the moderator.
No, I think, sure. Go ahead and take just a couple more seconds then, Mr. Chapman.
Certainly, because you know this should not be a one-off one-off conversation. This should not be done. I told a number of folks, and I will continue to tell folks this. I'm an administrator. I've been a school, part of a school administration that had SROs, and I've seen the good in SROs and I've seen the bad in SROs. And so we need to get this right. And that's what hopefully we're going to do as we continue with this conversation.
Thank you. And Mr. Rossello. You're muted, Bill.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I said the city council technically had the authority to cut the positions. That didn't make it right. The school board had voted 6-3 to keep the MOU in place. Principals, staff, parents, and students spoke resoundingly after the decision that they didn't agree with it. And even John Porter, the longest tenured principal of TC Williams and probably one of the most revered people in the city, did something very unusual. He came out publicly and with a strong opinion about something in his retirement. So, but the biggest issue here is that we have an elected school board. They should make decisions about this. They know what's going on in their schools. And I frankly think the kids are going to lose a mentoring opportunity, an opportunity to actually know a police officer early in their lives. I think it's very important.
Thank you. And last response is from Ms. Teklu.
Thank you for the question. I think it's an important one for the recent council decision and the time that we are in right now in the United States. We've had heightened conversations around police brutality on a national level, and we've taken that and we've looked locally and seen how have our communities of color been disproportionately affected by over-policing. And so in terms of my position on this particular issue, I am in support of the council's decision to remove SROs from our schools. And I'll, I think to some of the points made today, it really is a conversation now of how do we reimagine policing moving forward. I do think the SRO program is a great opportunity for our APD staff to connect in a different way with our young people. And that relationship should still be a priority for us. And I know we're exploring other ways to stay involved with our young people and our communities, which is great. I also think this COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the need of mental health resources for our students as well. And so taking this year as a break from that, starting the conversation, it will be important for us.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been an absolute pleasure to be your moderator for this evening. Thank you to all the candidates and residents for joining this forum. I think, again, it was a very productive and informative session. I know I've certainly learned a lot about each one of you and your opinions and thoughts on the issues facing our city. Thank you again. And Jeannie, as president of SRCA, why don't you please close us out?
I want to thank all of the candidates for sharing their time with us this evening. The residents of Seminary Ridge greatly appreciate your willingness to be here with us and to share your reasons for running for city council. Also, thank you to everyone from Seminary Ridge who joined us this evening to listen to the candidates. I think we've learned a lot about their positions on issues affecting our community. Our third forum with the next 5 candidates for city council will be next Monday evening, May 24th. It will begin at 7 o'clock again instead of 7:15. So mark your calendars and join us for forum number 3. Again, thank you to Mike Souza for being our moderator this evening and to Richie Weiblinger for making the second forum run so smoothly. Remember, the Democrat primary is on Tuesday, June 8th, and is open to all registered voters in Alexandria. So mark your calendars and vote. Finally, a special thank you and best wishes to all of the candidates who participated this evening. Good night, and I hope to see you all on Monday evening.
All right.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you all.
Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Jeannie.
Bye now.
Thank
Thank you. Have a good evening.